Welcome back to episode 4 of WNBA Retrospect, a historical WNBA scouting series. Today we'll discuss Chamique Holdsclaw, one of the most hyped prospects in WNBA history, who drew lofty comparisons to arguably the greatest player in NBA history in Michael Jordan during her time at Tennessee due to her athletic two-way skill set. In segment 1, I'll be joined by Semeka Randall Lay, a former teammate of Holdsclaw at Tennessee, for insight into her greatness. After that, for segments 2 and 3, I'll be back joined by my usual co-hosts, Adler and Lincoln Shafer. Locked Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogumbawale for the win.
Good! You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Welcome. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. My name's Cedric. I'm your Saturday host covering prospect scouting and women's basketball at large. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and here on YouTube. As I said, our conversation today is about Tennessee wing Chamique Holdsclaw. So let's take you back to 1999. During Holdsclaw's time in Tennessee, she won 3 straight national championships from 1996 to 1998. As well as being awarded the Naismith Player of the Year award in back-to-back seasons in 1998 and 1999. After Holdsclaw's storied collegiate career, she was drafted number 1 overall by the Washington Mystics in the 1999 WNBA Draft. And now I'll send it to my conversation with Semeka Randall Lay. I'm now joined by Winthrop head coach and former Tennessee standout Semeka Randall Lay. She was a key contributor for the undefeated 1998 Lady Vols and eventually the number 17 pick in the 2001 WNBA Draft to the Seattle Storm. How's it going today, Coach?
I'm doing great. How you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
But starting off at the top, what was it like to play alongside Chamique as a teammate, and how did she elevate things for you guys on and off the court?
Okay, what it's like? Well, first, I would say playing with Chamique was an extraordinary experience. Chamique and I, we kind of go back before college even started for us. I remember going to a camp. It's called the ABC camp, and it was up on the East Coast, and playing against her. And then becoming her roommate on that trip was a phenomenal experience. Just a really laid back type of person, very silly, likes to do a lot of pranks and stuff like that. But on the court, she can score at all 3 levels, as we say today. But she was just a beast, like a winner, true winner.
And could you give a little breakdown on Pat's offense and what her role was within this system? Because from watching some film back on just like some of the old tape, it seemed like she had the freedom to like run in transition, lead the break, kind of handle the ball a little bit. That's what I saw on tape as well.
Well, you were accurate in your assessment, Hunter. She had the ability, and Pat gave her that ability. And even when we came to college my freshman year, we knew that this was Chamique Holdsclaw's team. So her ability to start our break, to at that time we ran a triangle offense, so getting her at that high post area, her or Tamika, and letting them go to work where they were just deadly because they could face you up, they could post you up, and in particular Chamique could do all those, and then she got crazy rebounds over you.
And yeah, another thing that I kind of noticed was just her handle as well. Like we'll see it with some players now, like at 6'2", she had the handle. She has like her length is pretty absurd for a player at her size as well, and just her movement abilities as well. Is there any players looking back now that you see in the present day game that kind of remind you of her? Like for me, I think Jordan Horston physically, some of the stuff she does, I think she's 6'2", 6'6" wingspan, operates in the mid range a lot. So that's kind of the stuff I see with her.
What player today? That's kind of hard because and I know Jordan's always gotten that comparison, but it's hard because, Jordan does some things well on the court, but Chamique was just a prolific scorer. And Jordan looks to pass first, where Chamique was going to put the ball in the basket. And you can look at Tennessee, what is she ranked number 2 in all-time scoring? So her ability just to get a bucket, that's what she did well, and she really didn't need any offense to like a play to be ran for her. Like she could literally just go at any time and make a play, whether it was for her or for her team. But current, like the only person that like really compares, and obviously Tamika, was our teammate Tamika Catchings. I felt like they had very similar game, but then another one will be Maya Moore, and I just don't know if I've seen that 4 player in today's game that has her killer instincts and just her savviness out on the court, and she did on both ends. Chamique wasn't a bad defender either. Blocked a lot of shots, played really, really good defense. So I'm struggling with that one.
And how do you think her game would scale to like the present day? Because obviously the 3-point shot wasn't as prolific back then, but some of the stuff she does, just big guard, can handle in transition. Some of that stuff is what you see now.
Yeah, I mean, I think she would have been fine, and I think she would have still been an all-star playing with the players here, because one thing, what makes Chamique special is her versatility. I think she could go 3-4 on any team today in the league. And so if she's at the 4, most 4s can't guard her off the dribble, and with her ball handling skills, and then 3s, she could just post them up. So it's hard to say who could really shut her down in this day and age.
I want to ask a little bit about like her creation ability as well. And within Tennessee's scheme, what was the progression like in practice? Did she hold like a leadership role, or was she more of just kind of laid back in that sense?
No. She was definitely a leader on the court, challenging us, very vocal in the locker room, at practice, wanting to push us to be the best that we could be. What I love about when you have great leaders like that they're able to take it from their peers. I mean, if I go back to our that year, 98, when we won the national championship, Chamique was struggling in a game. I think it was the Elite 8 to go to the Final Four or whatnot, and she didn't play well. And so it was several people, coaches, myself, saying, Chamique, yo, you need to step up. Like, we don't win if you don't show up. We've done all we can do, but we need our leader to carry us over the finish line. And she looked back at me and was like, all right, Meek, I got you. We're down by 12. Next thing I know, Meek might have scored 15 points in a row. And next thing you know, we're going to the Final Four to win our national championship, because that was our championship game. The semifinal game, it wasn't tough. And the championship game, we were so ready to just beat everybody, because we got exactly to where we wanted to. So it was 2 games prior that ended up being our championship game. And that's when our leader, she came out and like say, hey, if you want to say she was our Batman, that was our Batman. She did the thing.
Now, after the break, I'll be joined by co-hosts Adler and Lincoln Shafer to dive into our scouting grades on Holdsclaw, and later we'll talk about her WNBA career. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over/under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on this app that's safe, free, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA to get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back. I'm your host, Hunter Cruse, and thanks for joining us. Let's get into our scouting grades on Chamique, based solely on our film we watched from our days at Tennessee, rather than taking into account current schemes, current philosophies that you'll see in WNBA teams today. But first, for those unfamiliar, our scouting scale is a 20/80 scale, going up from 20 being like basically a draftable prospect, for a drafting prospect, up to like 40, which is an average WNBA contributor, 45 is a top end backup, 50 is your average starter, 55 is above average starter, 60 is an all-star caliber player, 70 is all WNBA caliber player, and then finally 80, which we're going to start getting into more, which is reserved to your MVP candidates, basically first team all WNBA caliber players. So now that we got this out of the way, I'm gonna let you get started because I figure that you're probably lower on her than us.
Because I'm such a nice person, I'll give it to Lincoln first.
Yeah. So watching Holdsclaw is like, it's something that feels, it's a wild experience to watch
It's a
Holdsclaw
religious
play
experience.
in college. Yeah. You just see this really long, super athletic wing wearing number 23 and doing things that you very rarely see on a college basketball court. And like, she's one of the most athletic guard wing prospects that I've ever seen. Like, in terms of what a 20 or 21-year-old is doing on the court. She's incredibly smooth, moving with the ball in her hands and without the ball in her hands. And she's a special athlete, and she is getting buckets at Tennessee. And because of that, I put her grade at like a minimum 60 grade, which is like projecting as a several-time All-Star, and at the higher end, maybe touching 70, but I would lean closer to 60 than 70.
Yeah, I expected actually you to be higher than me. I had her as a soft 7, so like 60 feels too low, but 70 feels a little bit too high. So that's about a soft 7 for me. Basically, it's really not about what she can do. It's just sort of trying to figure out what the cap is on how much she can do it and what that does for the rest of your team, which you know that once you're getting into those kind of questions, you're dealing with someone who is historically unique just as a prospect in terms of the ability of what they can do. Like the ability she has from the mid-range and as a mid-air finisher, as a finisher around the rim, navigating traffic, it's absolutely unbelievable. The things that she is able to do in terms of her core strength, her rotational flexibility, just the really unteachable, unlearnable knack for having perfectly square shoulders and hips to the rim as she takes her jump shot, no matter how she gets it off. It's absurd, and again, that is the kind of skill that someone is kind of just born with. You can't teach that. So the raw talent in terms of being able to hit from like 18 feet or closer, it's unteachable. It's right there. And she is able to get up the shot over pretty much anyone because Lincoln, as you mentioned, she's just an ungodly athlete in so many ways. I would say she definitely has the best body control and the best core stability and flexibility of anyone I've ever watched play women's basketball. It's hard to describe. And the one thing I think that comes with that is that in terms of her skill set that's so unique is that most of the time when we talk about players who are in that sort of athletic mid-range shot creator role, we talk about players who do so much with the ball in their hands but when it's not in their hands, it's hard to sort of figure out what they're doing because of that limited range. I'm thinking we talked about this extensively last year with Rickea Jackson. It's what should be when she doesn't have the ball in their hands. But Chamique Holdsclaw she was incredibly scalable. She was super happy to give you 17 points on like 8 shots, or she could just completely take over a game, and she did so many times. She had a run in her junior year where she scored 20 plus points in 9 straight games. I believe that's still a Tennessee record if Rickea Jackson didn't tie it at the end of this past season when for Tennessee. Depending on the structure, I mean, you could look at that and you could say, if you look at the Minnesota Lynx 2010s dynasty, Simone Augustus is sort of just pushed forward what the archetype, at least for Chamique, was in terms of a little more efficient with the shot profile, but still as adept in sort of specific areas, although Moan really actually wasn't as good of a scorer as the flashes we saw from Chamique in the W, and that we saw at Tennessee all the time, just because of the profile Chamique had as an athlete, and because she was basically going from 18 feet to the rim and a lot to the rim, as opposed to going from like 22 feet to 15, and then that being your money range. Sorry, Lincoln. What?
Chamique, inarguably has one of the greatest college basketball careers of all time. As a 3-time national champion, 4-time All-American, 2-time Naismith Player of the Year, and 2-time Turning Most Outstanding Player, while also graduating as the all-time leader in scoring and rebounding at Tennessee, one of the most storied programs in the history of women's college basketball.
And not just that, a Tennessee program that at that point was, I would say, obviously really successful and had a hell of really well coached and had a hell of a lot of talent coming through it, but wasn't exactly set up to maximize every individual on its team in the way that I think you do see out of the aughts and especially the 2010s UConn. It's just a stylistic difference. They were successful for a good reason. It was an incredible dynasty. But yeah, I think when it comes down to me for Chamique is in terms of actually getting to the grade to close this long rambling thought is that is all the strength, and there's really no question about that strength and how good she is going to be and just how good she is at it. The question I think becomes on offense sort of it's not a one trick pony, but it is how versatile in this scoring approach can we get, because you need to have options for when the shot might not fall. Not that it really ever didn't at Tennessee, but in the W, it's you want to be able to space and spot up, and you want to be able to help create offense for the rest of your team. Otherwise, it really places a hard cap on where you can go in terms of value. Mona had that off-ball ability that allowed her to not just, because Chamique was an excellent mover without the ball, I think, but that was more so of not clogging the offense and opening up herself for a shot as opposed to her teammates as much. And it was also weird to me in terms of she kind of sucked at defense, I think is the best way I can put it. Like for how good she was at offense, that's about how bad she was at defense for me. Like maybe it was a Kobe Bryant thing where it's just giving so much on offense, there's nothing to give on the other end. But the footwork was pretty terrible. There wasn't a lot of help, but there just also wasn't a lot of help in that era anyway. And it in my opinion, leads to some trickiness in terms of matching her up with her forward teammate in the pros, is because she's an offensive tweener in a good way, but a defensive 4 in a super limited way that makes it very hard to match her with someone, unless it's literally Tamika Catchings.
Yeah, that tandem is probably maybe the best forward combo in the history of college basketball.
Yeah, exactly. Because Catch is on offense, she's a hybrid 4, and on defense she's a 3-4 in like the best way possible. She can guard both super easily.
Do everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and Chamique was an offensive 3-4 in a fine way, but defensively she was a 4 in the way that's where you need to hide her.
Right.
And for me, I think I saw flashes of saying 80, but I think 70 is probably the more fair score from what I saw. But like you said, Lincoln, earlier, I'm pretty sure she had more awards than she had losses in her collegiate career. Like she had 17 losses in 4 years, and she was like the Naismith Decade of the Year winner. I believe she's basically the first major prospect to come in the WNBA. Like we've talked about 3 prospects before, but she's like the earliest draft pick to get a signature shoe. The hype was real with her, and even the MJ comps as well. I think the expectation at the time was 80. I think that was sort of based on what I was reading. The expectation was probably 80, but I think closer to 70 if you account for some of her defensive limitations. But like you said, some of that could have just been offensive usage, offensive load. But I think you saw the flashes with her stocks as well. I think you saw some of that stuff, just the highlights for me. But more like the nitty gritty stuff, I think was like less big in her scout. But overall, I mean, it was just a blast to watch. And
we've had this. Oh, first, it was amazing. Absolutely, there is. I mean, you can, if you're just looking for a good time, absolutely throw on any Tennessee tape when Chamique was there that you can find, because she barely missed a game. There too was the remarkable part with how many minutes she played. So yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. I think when it comes to our views philosophically, like stocks are more like one stock, or which is for listeners is it's just a term for like a steal and or a block. One stock on any play, no matter how well or poorly you're defending on that play, is worth like several good defensive plays in which you did not get a stop. That's just the difference in value. So it's hard to find the exact balance. But like for me, I always put more emphasis on being a solid defender with less stocks on a play-by-play basis than like getting more stocks and playing, just less fundamental defense and blowing some stuff in other plays. And I could be wrong, Hunter. I know you go a little bit in the other direction. This is one of our disagreements when we were ranking Diamond Miller this past year, who I think is actually a pretty decent defensive comp in this case.
Yeah, defensively, I think, that's a fair comp. Some of what Diamond does, like some of her hip mobility as well, you'll see with that with her. So for me, I think
higher ceiling obviously a higher ceiling in theory, at least for Shamique.
Yeah, I think the main difference between those two prospects, we'll get into the next segment with just different comps as well. But the difference is Diamond's handle doesn't compare to what Holdsclaw's handle was at, which is one of the best handles I've seen from a player at 6'2".
Oh, for sure. I just meant defense. I just meant defensively. I would never.
No
offense to Diamond. They're just games are like so dissimilar offensively.
On defense, I see the similarities. You see the transition stuff, like even in transition, you'll see with Holdsclaw being able to create similar to what Diamond can do. In the half court, there was definitely some stuff where missing rotations, just stuff that gives you a little bit of questions, because ideally your 80 grade player is going to be a good defender, especially at the wing. You're looking to have defensive impact. So I think the comp is fair, but I think at the time, it's probably easier to scheme around her being a bad defender. I think with the game being closer, the court being closer.
I think the flip side of that is just in terms of the approach to college at that time, and a little bit of the mostly college was just we want to find ways to get the ball in our best players' hands, but there was almost never any thought given to like how you got the ball there. There was little thought of which defender you were putting on them. So like Chamique, if she was the exact same player 20 years later, she's getting attacked on defense a hell of a lot more.
So after the break, we'll get into her WNBA career. Like I said earlier, she played with the Mystics after being drafted, was an all-star in her rookie season. So definitely an interesting discussion on what came to be her pro career. All right, so Chamique Holdsclaw is our discussion today, and to get back into it, what have you seen from just her WNBA career, how she progressed, and if she lived up to probably our scouting expectations from what we saw at Tennessee?
We have a lot of names on our list. We have a lot of names from eras where it's hard to find some tape. We have a lot of names about which a lot has been written. And players who the jury's still out on, players who are controversial, not for things they did, but just because their play you could go either way on philosophically. I don't think anyone comes close to approaching the sort of gray area that Chamique, for basically her entire career, her on-court play sort of found itself in. 4 or 5-time All-Star. I think it was 5 or 4 of her first 5 seasons, and then one of the seasons in LA. Could be wrong about that. It's hard to say, just from the limited amount that we can see of her WNBA career, that she wasn't an excellent mid-range scorer even then. The 3-point shot, as sort of we kind of expected, never came along. It never looked good at Tennessee. It didn't even show signs. It really, I don't think it even showed signs of being hopeful there. It was more often kind of an air ball than hitting rim. And that's just sort of a function of the kind of athlete she was in terms of rising and then shooting over someone as opposed to having the efficient power transfer. That's kind of difficult to get into these days, but that's neither here nor there. One of the things that I was really concerned about that I forgot to mention before, but the passing was kind of bad. Like at best it was mediocre. She had some flashes, in my opinion, but there were a lot of times where it was just sort of not there. She didn't get tunnel vision, but there was just little value creation. And you see that play out the WNBA level, where she's a play finisher in the best kind of way, but there's not a lot of generation coming from her on that side either. But the real issue is there's no tape. We can find one game from 2004 which was not even her best year of like the years where she was at her best early on before her mental health issues really started catching up to her. We can find a lot of tape from her last season, the one season she played in San Antonio, and she looks fine there. She looks about what you would expect from a player in her last couple years after seeing what she was at Tennessee. Probably wouldn't expect that at age 32, but aging curves are different for everyone, and also given what she dealt with in between, it's not surprising. But again, everything in between, I don't know, man. I don't know. I can't find it. It doesn't exist. I'm betting you the WNBA has it somewhere in their vault in their archives. I just wish they'd upload it.
It's still the craziest thing that a scoring champion season has no film. 2002, I believe it was.
Scoring champion who was still being comped to MJ, and not for truly unthinkable reasons at that point. No film.
And do you want to get into your first comp with that?
Yeah, I mean, again, as Lincoln has repeatedly said, it's the forbidden comp because there's no reason to do it for anyone. But if there is, Chamique was the one to do it for. You watch her at Tennessee and you understand why everyone was calling her the female MJ. There's genuinely no other way to describe her body control, her ability to square up her hips and her shoulders from any base, the physical ability in her core, and everything that she was able to do as a mid-range scorer. Given the caveats we've said so far, the only comp I could and I tried, the only comp that I could possibly think of was like, what if Michael Jordan was just a bad defender? Like, what if Michael Jordan like just couldn't play defense? That's Chamique.
And didn't you like?
And how good of a player is Michael Jordan if he can't play defense? Still a good player.
Yeah. What about you, Lincoln?
Yeah, for me, it's someone who also was compared to Michael Jordan before they were drafted. Someone who went number 1 overall and had a little bit of a different curve in entering professional basketball, and that's Andrew Wiggins.
I knew you were going to say that.
Twice as smooth, because I think the way Chamique moves with the ball in her hands and without the ball in her hands is about half again as smooth as Andrew Wiggins moves with the ball, but it's the same kind of archetype of player, the long mega
half
athlete.
As smooth as Wiggins or twice as smooth as Wiggins?
Half again as smooth as Wiggins. So significantly more smooth than Wiggins.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm really confused.
But if Andrew Wiggins was a more fluid athlete, I got that part. I just can't do math. In Holdsclaw. That the kind of living in the mid-range scoring, the occasional lapses defensively, and the they share some of their worst tendencies on a basketball court, while also sharing out of this world athleticism and a knack for putting the ball in the hoop.
Yeah, I like that.
Is that our comps for this one?
I think so.
And see, that just says how a unique of a player we're talking about here, because we've seen players that are long athletic wings, but we haven't seen very rarely a wing with the scoring instincts and the tenacity that we see with someone like Holdsclaw.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty remarkable to watch some of what she was doing at Tennessee, and I wish we could see it when she played the WNBA, because that would be fun. But yeah, I think the main thing with her is how her pro career progressed. You probably are like, I think kind of my expectation was at Tennessee, you probably think this is like an MVP candidate, and she didn't really get to that point. I don't think she never was like a championship team to like that degree,
which wasn't entirely her fault. She got drafted by
it was just the era as well,
who took a while to even get competent, let alone what they were able to do in the mid to late aughts, or not the mid to late aughts, mid to late 2010s. But also, I mean, when she was able to get to free agency, go to LA, I mean, that was during sort of LA's transition period, where it was, in between Lisa and Candace. Well, sorry, not in between, but like in between Lisa winning your MVPs and Candace coming in, because that's sort of your dip for LA. I mean, yeah, that's tough. It's unfortunate. I think, as you said, we're even having a 7 on her compared to the hype was an 8 at the time. Like even with our 7 being lower than the hype, it's still a disappointing career, but I don't think that's any fault of hers. I mean, we have talked about, not necessarily on the pod, but we've talked about sort of the things that went into her trying to deal with what she was going through at the time, and even being able to do as well as she did on the court throughout that period is pretty remarkable, I think, when you consider what she had to deal with that was pulling her away from basketball.
Yeah, I know now she's been a big advocate for mental health, stuff like that, which is amazing to see her bounce back, because I know it was definitely probably tough for her, the expectations of carrying this high of a mark, even with the MJ comps as well. That's a big high mark that you don't usually see a lot. But yeah, I think this is where we wrap up today. Thanks for making Women's Basketball your first listen every day. On Monday, your host Missy Hydra will be back for a conversation with Michigan head coach Robin Freilich. Have a great weekend, everyone.